All right, so when I pitched this idea for a GM panel almost a year ago now, calling on my friends, Julien and Jason, thanks guys, to share their thoughts with the council, I knew it would be pretty epic. What I didn't know then is that today we would be hearing from the GM who took our Lightning to back-to-back Stanley Cups, a Stanley Cup final appearance in 2022, and a Stanley Cup playoff appearance in 2023. And that we would also be hearing from the GM who brought our Bucks Tom Brady, another Lombardi trophy, and now Baker Mayfield. And the GM who has led our Rays into 4 straight postseason appearances, a World Series berth, and who now hold the best record in Major League Baseball. Thank you all for all you do that keeps sports so exciting for us here in Tampa Bay. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Bridget Bello with Tampa Bay Business and Wealth to introduce our moderator, JP Peterson.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to make this introduction. JP and I have known each other for a long time and ran in a lot of the same circles for a long time as well. He's a longtime sportscaster that has worked in local TV and radio in Tampa Bay since 1997. He was the lead sports anchor and reporter at WFLA, News Channel 8, from 1999 until 2009. He hosted sports talk shows on WDAE 95.3 and has network experience with NBC Sunday Night Football and Lightning Live on Bally's Sports Sun. JP is currently the host of Lightning Hockey Night Live and JP Peterson Show, easy for you to say, a daily live stream podcast focused on Tampa Bay sports. Fitting for our CEO Council group here today, he is also CEO of his own sports media company, the rapidly growing Fan Stream Sports, which produces over 20 sports and pop culture podcasts and websites. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, JP, to the stage. Thank you for being here, JP.
Thank you, Bridget. Appreciate that. Thank you for not going into specifics about our past. Thank you all very much for having me. It is such an honor to be here today among some of the powerful here today. I'm not texting my girlfriend. This is where I keep all my notes. It's an appendage, as it is for most of us. And I know you three especially. They never leave home without it. So I have all my notes here. I want to thank the Yankees and Howard for having us here. Glad that he left because we will be disparaging the Yankees every chance we get. We love the Yankees. Great organization. We're glad they make their home here. But obviously, this is Rays country, and we're enjoying it. What a start to the season. So I want to thank them for having us here. And thank you, all the CEOs here. I've been to a couple of events. It's a fantastic group here, and it really is an honor to be here before you today. I didn't know this, but our triumvirate here has never appeared in public anyway, in a roundtable discussion. So what a get for you guys. Very well done. This is a big deal. And today we're going to have some fun, obviously. We always do. But also we'll get a little business done here because there are some shared tasks and goals that you guys have as CEOs that you have a lot of synergies with what these teams do, right? In terms of winning what you do every day, doing it on a budget, right? Doing it and attracting talent. So we're going to try to tap into their expertise in all of these areas so that we can learn from these great minds how they've had so much success and how it can apply to your business as well. So first and foremost, it is great to be here in Tampa Bay, right? It is the greatest place in the world to live. Now Forbes and everybody else is telling the world, so maybe we need to just kind of calm down on that a little bit because we know what it is here. But we have today with us the 3 architects of Tampa Bay, the guys that have made this happen. Without these gentlemen, we have no Wander Franco. We have no Tom Brady. We have no Steven Stamkos. We have no Tampa Bay. So as much as those guys are, without these guys, we don't have any of it. So we're going to tap into that knowledge today. Now, I thought I'd have a little special theme today to go with some of the pop culture that so many of us parents have had to endure, and that's the superheroes craze. So I've come up with a superhero to join each one of these guys. I hope they like it. They told me that they didn't want to know, so we'll, as we introduce them and bring them up, we'll have some fun with this. We'll start with the dean of our general managers, the great Jason Licht, who I am going to call the Hulk. Yes, the Hulk. He's a big man, former offensive lineman. He deals with a lot of big, powerful men, right? And he's done a fantastic job with the Buccaneers. I'll let you pick any seat you like. I'm going to stand up here so I can face you guys. And obviously brought Tom Brady a couple of division championships here. And, of course, the first general manager to win a Super Bowl in his own stadium, the great Jason Licht. All right, next up is a man I'm going to call Iron Man because of his innovative and creative ways that he's been able to do things and come up with great inventions and make Rays baseball just the absolute envy of every organization in baseball. And he's starting his 18th season overall, his 6th as the top executive. They've gone to 4 straight postseasons and, of course, a World Series. The great Erik Neander, Iron Man. I thought you were going to fly up here. No?
Better than Big Head.
Yeah, okay. I got a lot of help with this from my kids. They came up with it. And finally, I think you actually resemble this particular superhero. Not that you guys don't. Julien BriseBois, who I'm going to call Thor, right? There's a little Thor there, right? And dabbles in Norwegian culture with Victor Hedman, right? We'll go with that. And, of course, brings the hammer to the rest of the NHL. Julien BriseBois, who in his first season won 62 games, set an NHL record, got the President's Trophy, and then just followed up with a couple of cups and a conference final. The great Julien BriseBois. Welcome, Thor. I hope that's not too much pressure for you guys, all right? All right, so we're going to do I'll ask a few questions, and then we'll do a little Q&A at the end. So if you guys are thinking of some questions, you know which questions not to ask, okay, all right? We're not giving away any secrets here of who he's getting at the deadline or who else is getting drafted. So we're going to kind of stick to a lot of the business part of it and some great stories. So
if there are no cameras and no one's recording, I'll tell you.
yeah, okay,
I'll tell you
yeah.
who it is.
I don't see one here. I don't see any of them here. No, not a one.
There's always cameras.
Yeah. There's always camera. That's the first question. How do you deal with us, me, and the media, always having cameras and everybody? Now you have all these reporters as well that you have to deal with, right? All right, so the first question, this is for all of you. Jason, we'll give you the first start here. You have many things in common with the CEOs in this room, as I mentioned, and most obvious is your shared task of acquiring talent at the best price, too. Erik, and you can certainly talk to that. What are the key metrics and qualities that you look for when you evaluate players and coaches?
Well, we have a lot of metrics that we look at players. We'll start with them. Depending on their position, obviously speed, their hands, their quickness, all those things that go along with it. And that's very tough to evaluate sometimes, but that's the easiest part of the actual evaluation. And I'll tell you why. It's, when we miss on a player, and league-wide too, we don't miss on the talent, we miss on the person. And we miss on, what's above the neck. And so we spend a lot of time on the character aspect, just as much time on the metrics of the character. So we want to know everything about these guys. There's difference between being a bad person and an immature person. Everybody's got some immature mistakes they've made, but what do they do when no one's watching? How do they respect people? How coachable are they? What kind of a teammate? How passionate are they? What kind of a team? How important is winning to them? So we started really diving into that about 6 years ago and using Chris Godwin and Mike Evans as our poster child because they made it. And we've had a little bit more success with our draft picks with that. So the character aspect is very, very important to us, especially in football, which is a very much a team sport. Not that your sports aren't, but very much a team sport. And the coaching, our head coach in football, we only have 17 regular season games and then hopefully playoffs. So our coach is in front of the team and giving a speech and giving a message 10 times a week, as opposed to you play 82 games, you play 162. where the message would get drowned out if you're talking that much. So what you're looking for in a coach is somebody that's steady, somebody that has high EQ, emotional intelligence, that is always the same. It's whether he's fiery, that's fine. Bruce was firing, dropping F-bombs all the time. But at least he was effing consistent with it. All right. Todd is a little bit more steady and able to weather the storm, and that's fine too. But as long as they're steady and they're patient, those are the qualities we're looking for in a coach. And he's already made it. We know he's got X's and O's. He knows scheme. But when you become a head coach, that kind of goes out the window. You have to manage the entire team. And we got 69 players during the season, so it's a little bit tougher.
And Erik, I imagine it can be difficult for you as well because you're dealing with a lot of foreign players too. So maybe it's a little bit harder to get those type of reads.
Yeah, I think to some extent, and to avoid just saying many of the things that you just shared that we wholeheartedly agree with, because our revenues are lighter than our opponents, our payrolls are lower, however you want to look at that. From a metric standpoint, we're always evolving. Baseball is unique. It's a team sport, but the interactions on the field competitively are very isolated, right? The hitter versus the pitcher, so it gives us a little bit more of a head start when it comes to understanding information, whereas these two guys, it's far more complicated. That effort, you're just trying to be as precise as possible when understanding, players' foot speed, bat speed, contact abilities, so on and so forth. That's just an ongoing evolution. I think the thing to what you're talking to, and that maybe you could speak a little more to, be it Matt Joyce, who's here, when we brought him in, you're always looking for the ability first, always, but a reason that they might be able to thrive a little bit better in our environment. That might be they've bounced around from a few teams. It might be someone like Tyler Glass now that's buried in Pittsburgh's bullpen, and he's not finding success. We can bring him in, tell him he's starting, let him have some leash, and just go. Matt Joyce grew up in this area. Oftentimes, there's a comfort when you're settling into the big leagues and you're trying to find success. It's really hard. Giving them a support system and the things around them that make that a little bit easier, I think does matter and plays a role in our success, I think, over time. Matty can probably speak to that better than I can. And then furthermore, from a coaching standpoint, staff is really important to us. Our understanding of the game is always moving. We try to learn from mistakes. We're not afraid to make mistakes. We look for people that are passionate about the game, that are strong enough to share what they believe in, but also strong enough to acknowledge that they don't know everything and have a lot of respect for different perspectives. So a lot of our effort to continue to grow and evolve is very staff focused. That goes from Kevin Cash, that goes from me. There's a lot I don't know. There's a lot of people that work in our operation that know a lot more about different parts of how we operate than I do. And you just try to provide a culture and an environment where people feel they can contribute and they feel like they can get better and they respect one another.
And my reporter instinct kicked in here when you mentioned Tyler. So I'll just, if you could
Gotta
share
ask.
anything, he got taken out of the game last night in Durham. Any update?
I'm hoping it's a sign of maturity rather than a further injury. So not while we're here, no cameras, right? We'll actually have a better idea today. He was planning to come back no matter what to this area, to Tampa Bay area this morning. He's doing that. He'll get checked out. He's adamant. He woke up symptom-free, feels good. More being cautious, mechanically felt a little out of whack and didn't want it to turn into something. This has been a frustrating journey for him, certainly coming back from the Tommy John to the oblique. I think it's a case of being a little too careful than it is anything else, but we'll have a better idea later today.
Good to know. You guys got the scoop on that. All right. Julien, you have to recruit globally, obviously. The NHL is a very global game, and as MLB, maybe not as much NFL. What are the challenges in that as well when you're trying to find talent?
Well, I think it depends when you're looking. Like player procurement is one of our core competencies. Like when we set up, how are we going to beat the competition? We're going to be better than the competition in these three areas. One is player procurement, getting the players we want within our organization so we can work with them. The second one was player development, getting the most out of the individual players. And the third is team building, getting the most out of the collective. So player procurement is something we spend a lot of time on. And then depending on what time in their player's career we're talking about, it will impact what we're looking for. When we draft a player, an 18-year-old player, whether he's from Russia or from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, or from Boston, he's not going to play for the Lightning probably for 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 years. So it's less about how that player fits within our current roster and more about what is this player's potential down the road. If we are, like this time of year, we're focused on which free agents are we going to try to bring into our group or which of our current free agents we want to keep. Now we're looking for fit. So we already have all these great players. Name them: Stamkos, Hedman, Kucherov, Point, Vasilevsky. I can go on. We're fortunate we have a lot of good players, which is why I'm on this stage. And then we're looking who are the best players to complement those players and their skill sets. So that will really determine who we're able to bring in. And then the other, outside the caveat, is the salary cap. Right. We're in a hard salary cap world, so we have X amount of dollars. I've already allocated most of those dollars to our star players because they deserve it and they move the needle. They drive the bus for us, especially come playoff time. So then with my limited resources left, who is the best player to fit the role I have for the dollar amount I have?
And just to follow up on that real quick, and you talk about keeping talent as well. Obviously, when you have guys like in a salary cap world, Ryan McDonough, who you would keep forever, but you have to make these hard choices. How do you deal with that in terms of your personal feelings towards a player like that who you just love and you've come to grow so close to, and the business side of it when you have to make hard choices?
It's at the end of the day, when I'm meeting with Ryan McDonough and I'm telling him that I'm going to trade him, even though he has a full no trade clause, it's not about me. It's about him in the moment. Like, it doesn't matter what I feel. It matters what he feels. It matters how this is going to impact his family. And I'm close to his family. I know his kids. My kids know his kids. So, but I make it about them because I have to. It's about them, and then explain it as best as I can. But at the end of the day, it's not going to make it easier. There's no easy way to do this. But you just have to do what you have to do to help your team be in the best position possible to win. And when I talk to the players collectively, and I talk about, like, recently when we did our exit meeting, every decision I'm going to make going forward is to help us win going forward. It's not about the pass.
Yeah, tough stuff, no doubt about it. All right, this is also for all of you, and Erik, I'll let you start on this one. Once you've acquired the talent, how do you create a culture in which they are going to thrive, the Rays way, if you will, which has become such a hot button in Major League? Everybody wants it. That's why they come raid your front office every year. Do you have any example of stories of how you've taken a player that maybe, well, you've got a ton of stories, that maybe wasn't great someplace else, but when you brought them into your culture, they become great?
Yeah, that's a big part of how we've found success. I think, we're typically bringing in players that we identify them performing. It might not be in their results, but underneath they look a lot like the players that had better results, and don't think they're so far off from maybe their recent track record would suggest. And I think that's something that when we bring them in, look, we're an analytically oriented organization. That's a part of what we are. It's not the entirety of what we are. Confidence is so important to a major league player's success. The differences in ability, those margins are really tight. I think putting people in a position where you can demonstrate to them why they are so close to the players that have had success, or maybe they aren't as established, the things that they do well, and really try to lean into those and support them. Harold Ramirez last year was, I can go in a lot of different directions here. That just came to mind. It was a top 100 prospect at some point, bounced around through 4 or 5 different organizations, never really had a steady home. His star had dimmed. We brought him in, highlighted some things, explained some things about why we liked him as he is. And I think more than anything, through our coaching staff, through our front office, made sure that they appreciated why they were there, why we believed in them, and with some confidence breed some success. And I think the fact that we've been able to kind of do that a few times over, players now come in just expecting that to be the case, and they don't necessarily understand why. That's really helpful too. But it's a game of confidence. It's putting people in a position and not ask too much of them. And at a time like now, when it's going pretty good, you got a group that everybody wants to play more than they are, and that's okay.
And quick follow on that. The whole dynamic of having players that haven't gotten to that big contract yet, and that hunger, is that a winning edge for you guys?
I would like to think so. Until we win a World Series, you hear about it in the postseason that you don't have the experience. But I also think that, you look at each of these individual journeys, playing in the postseason is not the most pressurized moment of their lives. You know, Yandy Diaz, Randy Arozarena leaving Cuba. Let me tell you, the little bit I've heard them share about that, baseball's nothing, you know, in comparison. I think that's a big reason why Randy in 2020 went off in the postseason the way that he did and continues to. Pete Fairbanks, 2 Tommy John surgeries and, you know, basically left without an opportunity, but for him kind of saving his own career and trying some things differently. Non-drafted players, the Kiermaiers, you know, who's not here anymore, but the third day of the draft stories, so on and so forth. Collectively, I think that can be pretty powerful. You know, it's a group of players that for one reason or another have been overlooked. They haven't been given that opportunity that, you know, was finally provided to them by us. They don't all work out, but when you have a group of players that are playing with that in mind, it is powerful, and I do think it can negate some of the differences that exist with other organizations that have more established track records with their performance.
Yeah. We'll see this weekend. Jason, the Yankees. Culture, such an important thing in football as well, and you went through incredible culture change when you brought in Bruce Arians. What absolute incredible, brilliant move that was. And talk about that culture change and how it changed, how rapidly it changed. And then you had that other little agent of culture change, Tom Brady, come in, and it took it to another level.
Yeah. So first of all, player procurement is very important to us too. And so the focus of the player and confidence of the player, like Erik said, is so important that we want to make sure that they have everything, their mind focused on football when they're here. Even the little things like getting their driver's license, their insurance, their apartment, things like that can weigh heavily on a young player that can take away from their skill on the field. So we try to take care of all of that for them, which is not an easy task, you know, with all these players. But taking care of that is the first step so that they can focus on football. But in terms of the culture, you know, we started this. Bruce was a big believer, and I was with him in Arizona. That's where the relationship started. He and we were both at the Cardinals. Is in those rooms, in those position rooms, having, you know, you have your young players, your young rising studs, but you also want to have at least one veteran that's been there, that's done that is mature. So when we drafted Mike Evans, we had Vincent Jackson. Vincent Jackson was a great tutor for him. Then Mike was a great tutor for Chris Godwin. We've drafted Vita. We had Sue the following year we signed. You know, I could go on and on. Now, not every room have we been able to do that, and then there's some immaturity in some rooms, and you could probably do the math and figure out what those were. But, you know, the culture, when you have those, the mixture of personalities, but the mature people to help lead the young people that have a history of winning was really, really a big part of our success that year.
That's great stuff. And Julien, you, a little different, you came into an established culture, but the task of staying competitive. I think I read this the other day in the NHL. Of the last few Stanley Cup winners, most of them haven't even been back or have won a playoff series. Yet you put 3 years together, 10 years together, but especially the last 3 years. How do you keep that culture going, that winning culture, keep people hungry to that level?
I think the credit goes to the players, our leadership group first and foremost. We have really good players in the prime of their career, and luckily for us, they've remained hungry, right? They won a championship, but they weren't satisfied. After we won our second cup in a row, I spent a lot of time talking to people who were in Pittsburgh because they had won 2 in a row in 2016 and 2017. I asked them, why didn't you win 3 in a row? You had essentially the same team. And, you know, they, confidentially, no one's recording this, they lost the hunger. Like too many of their players had lost the hunger, and so we put that as a big point of emphasis going into the season with our leadership group, making sure they were hungry, making sure we brought new people in who hadn't won, who now we're going to be hungry not only for ourselves but for our teammates. But it was a challenge, and you know, again, it comes down to we try to bring people in our organization who have pride and ambition. So the pride is what's going to keep you pushing yourself when things are challenging, and the ambition is what's going to have you keep pushing yourself when you're having success. And I think it's the ambition of the people within our organization that has created this culture for us.
Yeah, that leadership in the room, going back to Torts, you know, always said, let the room take care of itself. You know, there's only so much you can do, but you've got to have that leadership in the room. All right, here's some individual questions, and this one we'll start with you, Jason, for many of the CEOs in here, they dream of obtaining a GOAT in whatever profession it is, right? The best player available. You actually did it. So tell us the story, how you brought Tom Brady to Tampa Bay, if you want to get into some of this, maybe some stuff we haven't heard. And I'm sure it started with me saying, you got to go get Tom Brady. He will come here on my show. I remember that distinctly. I was the first one to say it, you know.
Yeah, I was driving down the road. I hit the brakes. No, there's a hell of an
Never even
idea.
thought of that. I know.
Why didn't any of my people come up with that?
Come on. Why am I not on the payroll?
Yeah, I know there's no cameras in here, but I got to be really careful here. There's a lot of anti-tampering rules in football, and teams lose first-round picks now, and GMs get fined $500,000. So we had to be very careful and live up to those rules. So it's really tough. So that year we're going after Tom, it was like, why the hell not? Let's go for it. Yeah. And I had been a part of the Patriots organization I was actually there when we drafted Tom. Now I wasn't the reason we drafted Tom. I wish I could say that, but I was there when we drafted Tom. So I had a relationship with him, but we had to really kind of hold tight and hope that he saw the same thing that we saw in our team when he was making his decision, until I could call the agent when the tampering period opened. And I'll never forget when I called his agent, Don Yee is his name, and called him and said, hey, Don, it was Jason Tampa. And he said right away, he said, you made the right call. And I thought that was a pretty good sign. Yeah. So as we started talking, he started kind of regurgitating all the things that we thought in-house would be the reasons he would want to come here. We called it Operation Shoeless Joe Jackson. They build it, he will come, all that stuff. We were doing inside the walls. And, he was like, well, you got a great offense, you got some receivers, you got a great defense, you got a head coach that's a great leader. You live in Florida. That was a big part of it too. And then, so when it came time when we made an agreement, but I had to talk to Tom, and Bruce and I had a few cocktails at his house. When we finally got to talk to him, the first thing that he said was, I need the names, I need the numbers, cell numbers of all the players. And then he said, I know you've got a number 12 on your roster, and we had already kind of thought about that. Okay? And talked to Chris about that, and he was pretty cool about it.
I would imagine.
But he said, hey, I don't need number 12. How about this? How about that 7? Go for that 7th ring. Let me be number 7. I said, well, we've got a few marketing people that want maybe number 12 would be better. Yeah. But anyway, I thought that was very unselfish of him, and I thought that was very cool, and it kind of epitomized what Tom was for us.
Incredible story. We'd like the real story later when all the cameras are on.
Those are in the ocean somewhere. All right.
All right, for Julien, for many years you apprenticed under Steve Yzerman, incredible player, GM, and he just this collection of talent. He's so good at getting that done, but obviously could never get over the hump. So you come in with this task and you make some very bold moves in obtaining Barclay Goodrow and Blake Coleman, and you take a lot of heat in the media. He gave up too much, all these first-round picks. So let's talk to CEOs about risk-taking. And how do you develop that mindset of, okay, this is the time to take the risk. We're ready to go. We can use some future assets. Let's go.
Well, if you're trying to accomplish something that is very hard, if you're trying to, accomplish something great, you're going to have to take risk, and you have to put yourself out there. We ask our players all the time to sacrifice, their individual success for the collective success, and we need to walk that talk as well. And that was probably an example of me, walking the talk. I knew we would take some heat for that. At the same time, you're making calculated risks, right? You're not being reckless. And I remember those are the words I used when I talked to our owner prior to this. I said, Jeff, we're going to go for it. It's time to go for it. We're going to be bold, but we're not going to be reckless. But it's going to be it's a fine line, and some people will have varying opinions as to which side of that line I'm walking right now. But if you can't, I've done a lot of research on decision making, poker, for example. If you play to not lose, you'll never lose big, but you'll never win. Like, you have to be willing to push your chips in at some point and hope to be lucky. Hope the stars align for you and that you're good enough and you get enough breaks, and then the reward is phenomenal. So that was the thought process. But at the same time, you don't want to be reckless. So it's very important that you know exactly what the risk is. What am I giving up? What's that worth? What am I getting back? What is that worth? And perception was that it was a big risk. Internally for us, it wasn't that big a risk because we felt like we had given up less than what we were getting back in return. Part of that is knowing the players. Part of that is having a really good understanding of what the draft picks are, because the perceived value of draft picks is significantly greater than the actual value of draft picks. Most players we draft, you don't know who they are 5 years later, even in the first round. So once you factor all of those elements in, you make the best decisions you can, and sometimes you get lucky.
Or you're just good.
Or you're lucky.
Good. Or you're really good at what you do, yes. All right, Erik, your job is very different from these two gentlemen because they have a salary cap to work within. Yours is a very unlevel playing field, especially within your division where teams can spend 3 or 4 times as much. Many of these CEOs have to compete with bigger companies on smaller budgets. What are some of your core values and strategies to be able to compete at that level in terms of ingenuity and creativity? Iron Man. How do you do it in the lab?
Iron Man. I forgot where. Yeah, Iron Man. It's better than Big Head, as I told you.
That's me.
That was the second choice.
Size
for my
8.
son.
What do you got? All right, a couple of size 8s up here. We don't find too many. Nice to meet you. Well. Yeah, the revenues and the disparities that exist. I think a few things. One, we spend very little time talking about it. I think anytime we spend talking about the disparities that exist, it's unproductive energy. I think we spend a lot of time, this is the lay of our land, these are the cards we have. How do we create the greatest opportunities within them, right? So when it comes to our payroll, you could say, we don't have as much money to spend as some of our competitors. Or you could say, well, that lets us really focus our attention on a smaller group of players, and we can know them better than other teams do. We can spend our time making sure that while they're distracted by the fame, the established track records, whatever, we can take this group over here that maybe is a little more tucked away, and we can make sure that we are dominating that space. I think a lot of it is just about finding opportunities. I will say, if we had an owner that wanted us to behave exactly like the Yankees, the Red Sox, and said, hey, make the same decisions they do, could go about roster construction the way that they do, construct a staff the way that they do, well, then we're probably going to finish where our revenues have us pegged. That's, if we make the same decisions they do with 25% the money, we're going to be 25% as good as they are, most likely. So having an owner that recognizes that has been remarkably stable and consistent with that recognition and to support risk-taking. He has a phrase that feels appropriate to share in this room. I don't say it to my kids, but he often encourages us to say, hey, break a window, just don't burn down the house, right? And in an environment that is so risk-averse as sports are, it's a cutthroat industry. A lot of the decisions are made off of recent results without a whole lot of patience, right? So to have an owner that is patient, that time and time again has given you the comfort that if you do what you think is best, no matter how it's perceived, that he's going to stand behind you. It's really powerful to to let that build, to learn, and to see where it takes us. As a story, I guess, with that, I've been with the Rays since 2007. I started as an intern. 2008 was my first full-time year. Only one season have we lost fewer than 80 games. We play 162. That year we won, it was 2016. I tried to black this out a little bit. We won 60-some games. We don't play 82, unfortunately. We won 60-some games. That was the year I got promoted to general manager. I can't find another example where that's happened. And that's the kind of example from the very top. I oversee our baseball group, but to have an owner that has that level of confidence and says, I like what you're doing. It's like, we won 60-some games. I like what you're doing. Let's go. I can't think of any better behavioral example that sets the tone for, I think, what we're about. And we take our shots, but the risk-taking, to what Julien said, I think it might be risky to an outsider's perspective, but for us, we think we're just doing the right thing. And as long as you believe you're doing the right thing for the right reasons, then I think you got to be willing to look short-term stupid to hopefully look long-term competent. And sometimes you look short-term stupid and long-term stupid, which is okay too. You got to be okay with that.
I wonder how you react to the official station of the Yankees, their sports radio guys going, oh, they must be cheating. That's what I see. I don't have any evidence to support my postulate there, but they're cheating. I mean, when you heard that, did you just like, thank you for the compliment?
Definitely off record and no cameras because I've been asked about that a lot and I haven't given one. But in our PR group said it to me early yesterday morning and he's like, I'm pissed, I'm this, I'm that, whatever. And I was like, it seems like quite the compliment.
Yes,
If we've reached this person that probably doesn't pay a whole lot of attention to us otherwise, like I think we're doing okay. I don't know. Yeah, people are taking note, and it is what it is. If the Astros didn't do what they did, then he probably doesn't have those suspicions. But the attention is, I think, for the right reasons because we're playing pretty well right now.
Darn right, darn right. All right, one more for all of you, then we'll do a little Q&A out there, so get your questions ready. All of you, of course, love to land the big fish, the Tom Brady, the big free agent, but I know secretly it's the diamond in the rough that you really, really love, right? That guy that you found. Give me maybe a story or maybe a process on how you go and find those guys, and when they hit, like how cool does that feel? And Jason, we'll start with you.
Yeah, for myself, I was a scout. I came up through the scouting world, and then our scouts. That's more rewarding than after we draft the first round pick is finding those diamonds in the rough, the undrafted free agents. And so we have a process we go through. We look for, we call it the ghost list. We look through players that have certain metrics that were overlooked, whether it's production, size, speed, all those things, character that we talked about before. But, we talk about these, but what really isn't talked about is how sometimes these just fall into our lap.
Yeah.
And you don't hear the story how when I drafted Chris Godwin that I really wanted another player and he went right before us and I was pissed. And threw my iced tea on the ground and ice everywhere. I'll just take Godwin, and the other guy was cut after a year. You don't hear that story. So we're luckier than we are good. So, well, at least I am.
You're sharing too much now. We were looking good. I mentioned luck earlier.
Forget
That's
everything
as far
you
as I
heard.
wanted
It's
to
all
go.
luck. Flip a coin, you might get lucky.
Get some other people up here.
I just got to be fully transparent. I'm lucky to have my job. I don't belong. I'm not on the same level as these two here. Big head doesn't mean big brain, except for in your case. So,
It does not.
but the one that I remember the most is, and I had a relationship with the agent, and was Cambrate. His agent was calling and begging us to bring him into rookie minicamp, which is this weekend for us this year, on a tryout. Didn't even have to sign him, give him any money. Went to the scouts. They said, yeah, he's a big receiver. He's slow. He didn't really play tight end at Harvard. He's smart, obviously. We'll give him a shot. And then, there we go. I look great. We signed this guy, and he goes on to become probably the best undrafted free agent in history of the Bucs. So that's, I wish I could tell you, like, there are stories of guys where the scouts really dug these guys out, but he's probably the best one.
Well, you also drafted Ali Marpet out of Hofstra, and so you've
Hobart.
done Hobart. That's Hobart. So not too shabby there. Erik, you got a story for us? You got many stories for us. A diamond in the rough.
That counterintuitive decision making is kind of our bread and butter. We got I think all the ones that didn't go too well, but I think on a higher level, I think it's not necessarily a diamond in the rough in some respects, but Randy Arozarena, just a more well-known player. That was one that when we made that trade, we also acquired Jose Martinez, who was the more established player. He was a right-handed hitting, mostly DH, not so much outfielder for the Cardinals. And I remember the headlines were all about Jose Martinez and thinking, we gave up a top 50 pitching prospect and Matthew Libator at the time for Jose Martinez. People thought it was crazy. The big reason we did that deal, no one wanted to hear it, was Randy. And I think what he's developed into is one of our superstars, I think, without a whole lot of question, has been really rewarding. He's exceeded every expectation we've had. To double down on the lucky part of some of this stuff, we were fairly indifferent between doing that trade with Randy and another outfielder they had. And thankfully, it was Randy is the direction that they went. But that, and to going through that was a decision that at the time wasn't very popular. And no matter how we explained it, I don't think there was a lot of credibility to the words, or perceived credibility to the words that we were saying when it came to Randy. That trade was largely made possible, or the willingness to do that trade and to take on, why would you acquire their 12th best prospect in their system for a top 50 prospect in all of baseball? It's a fair question. Was because there was a similar trade the year prior that we didn't do. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes there's a lot of decisions we don't make that lead to us being willing to make the decisions we do make. And I want to say it, but I'd rather not. We're gonna maybe in a follow-up, but
Just learning from some of the
absolutely. There's so many decisions you don't make that are never visible, and oftentimes those can be the ones that help push you out there to make a decision that you know will be ridiculed, but you believe is right. And
So many times we thank God for unanswered prayers. Yeah.
Yep.
Don't worry about being ridiculed. Those sports radio guys have no idea what they're talking about. Trust me on that. Julien, do you have a Yanni Gord story or?
That's the punchline.
Sorry, my bad.
All right, I'll build up to it.
I was getting the telepathy.
I think there are a lot of ways to get to general manager's position. We all came in through different ways. And I'll speak for my sport, but I think it applies to your sports as well. So if you come from a scouting background like Jason, when you're the general manager, you tend to spend a lot of time focusing on your scouting department. If you come from the coaching background, you're a former coach, you spend a lot of time second guessing your current coach. If you come from, and people don't notice, but I oversaw, so I talked about player procurement, player development, and team building earlier. For the longest time, what I considered my expertise was the player development aspect. So I kind of started in Montreal and then came here and kind of brought that and grew our department and oversaw our player development department. So my first story is going to go to a player development idea. So Yanni Gord was an undrafted player from Quebec, and I'm from Quebec. He's French-Canadian, I'm French-Canadian. Undersized, actually won the scoring championship in his junior league in Quebec, but went undrafted 3 years in a row, signed to play not in the NHL, not in the AHL, but in the ECHL. Spent essentially 2 years there, got a 25-game tryout in San Jose's organization, and he was doing really well. And one of our scouts had seen him and said, this guy could help our minor league team. So I started looking into him a little bit. And my thought when I signed him was, maybe he'll play in the NHL. The odds are really against him. Too small, just missing, not checking enough boxes. But he'll help our minor league team. So his contract lapsed at midnight at 12:01. I was on the road. I called his agent. I said, what would it take to sign him right now? You don't go back to San Jose. Like, you just stay with our organization. And it was dirt cheap, $50,000 spread over 2 years. Done and done. Send the contract in the middle of the night, get it signed, announce it the next day. Kind of sucks for San Jose, but they had 25 games to sign him. They didn't sign him. We signed him. He came into our team, did really well that first year, led our team in scoring at the minor league level. Had a decent second year. Now his contract's up, and we have an internal salary structure that we always respect. So if you're at this level, if you're at this stage in your career, this is what you get. We don't negotiate. Mm-hmm. And he had opportunities in Europe because he's a really good player, and he fit the profile of players that do really well in Europe, and you could make good money there. And we weren't getting anywhere on the contract. And his agent I knew really well. Yanni by then I knew really well. So I decided to drive to Quebec City, where he's from, in the off-season, and we'd have lunch together. And we'd decide if we were getting married or divorced. And we had a good meeting, and he's an awesome human being, and we already had a good relationship, and I left. And what made me decide to move off my number and give him more than we'd given to other guys, kind of raise our internal structure going forward, had nothing to do with Yanni Gord. We had just changed our head coach in the minor league level, and I wanted him to have a really good first year, be successful being the head coach in Syracuse, have a good team so that he could establish himself and run our development program going forward. And I said, well, Yanni Gord's going to help us do that for $5,000 or $10,000, whatever the difference was. Yeah, right. And so I gave Yanni the $10,000. And we went to the Calder Cup finals that year with him. He was our best player. Finished a year in Tampa. We signed him to a nice deal, and he helped us win 2 cups. And here we are.
That's a great story. So I can roam around and get some questions here. That's a great story because in terms of business, you came off your number. You did some stuff that was different because your instincts told you. And the other thing that I'm terrible at, you acted at midnight instead of, I can do it tomorrow, or I can do it.
It's a competitive business.
Yeah, no, I love it. That's great. All right, let me do my best whatever impression here. Well, we got lots of questions. We'll start right here.
Yeah, great content on character and taking risks. I think about all the stress that we have in our jobs and you have in your jobs, and we look to sports as an outlet, a way to get away from it all, except maybe in overtime and we're yelling, "Ref, you suck."
Us too.
But in general, it's a great relief to go to any of your events. So how do you all proactively manage stress to be the best version of yourself when you show up each and every day?
Jason, you want to start?
Yeah, so I have a 14-year-old, 12-year-old, and a 9-year-old. So I'm fairly young for my age, at least, and I just immerse myself in them, like their lives, whether what sports, lacrosse, basketball, football, all that stuff that they're doing. And this time of year, I can get home a little bit earlier, and there's always something that they want to do if they're home. And I've learned over the time. Beginning part of my career, I've been in this business at 26 or 27 years. It was who could get into the office the earliest and stay the latest was always the measure of who's the hardest worker. And over time, I've learned that it's not the case. Some people need the sleep to do their best work. Some people work better at night. Some people better morning. But one thing I've learned is you have to be in tune with your family, and that's what takes the stress away from me.
If you guys want to jump in, or we'll just get other questions. Go ahead, Erik.
I would second all of that. You got to trust the people you work with. We employ within our baseball department over 300 people. We're a larger staff, and if you trust and empower the people you work with, let them do their job and really lean into that, in addition to the family considerations, it can help. But I'd be lying if I said we lost 2 or 3 in Baltimore and I'm still a little bit upset about it, just like any other fan would be. There's a lot of overlap too. I don't want to.
You're 29-9. Give them a break, will you?
So I have a kind of a dumb question, but it's a leadership question. So in my company, I'm the CEO. I'm the top dog. We're going to go that way. Can you tell us about the leadership challenges? Because you have owners, you're the GM, but you've got subordinate leaders, i.e. coaches. How does that work?
Julien, you want to start on that?
Just with the coach? Well, I can only speak to my experience. We have a fabulous owner who is very busy doing all sorts of things, including revitalizing Tampa Bay and investing in philanthropic activities. He has 4 kids all over the country, and he likes to spend time with them as he should at this point in his life. So I have interaction with him, but it's not a daily thing. So for the most part, I keep him abreast of what's going on. I give him a heads up as to what I'm thinking going forward, usually in memo form, and then we'll discuss the memo so he can work at his schedule whenever that fits, which is often in the middle of the night somehow or for some reason. So I would lie if I said that my situation vis-a-vis my owner is typical, and I would also lie if I said I wasn't very privileged to have an owner who was as hands-off as he is with regards to at least my day-to-day stuff. With regards to our head coach, I hired him into our organization when I was running our player development program. He was the first head coach I hired when I came to Tampa. So I worked with him for 3 years. We had a lot of success together. We were able to build trust over time, which carries to this day. And after that, it's understanding which decisions are his and which decisions are mine. And sometimes you have to let him make decisions that you disagree with and support them. And sometimes he has to support decisions I'm making, even though he may not agree with them. And over time, because we have a fairly decent track record of success together, that trust is pretty strong today. So those conversations are actually pretty easy. Doesn't mean that there's not going to be friction every now and then, but it's healthy friction. It's coming from a good place. And I think trust is a big part of it.
Either one of you want to jump in there or take another one?
So question about the outside success that our teams in Tampa Bay have enjoyed. It's really remarkable. But before that, our teams were not all that successful. And I look back to the singular change in ownership for each of your organizations that really turned the organizations around. They made them how great they are right now. So I'm curious as to maybe one or two qualities of the owners and the ownership group that makes each of those organizations that you guys kind of run so successful right now.
Well, I'll speak for me. As a young scout starting in this business, I never really quite understood. As a scout, you're on the road all the time. You're hitting a school every day, going to practices, and you're just focused on writing your reports and evaluations on the players that you saw during the day. So, but I never quite understood when I heard some of the directors and GMs that would be on the road, you'd see occasionally how their owner, they didn't like their owner, and that's the reason they're not going to win. I was like, well, how could an owner be the reason that you're not winning? I couldn't understand that until you get into the front office and you realize just how important it is to have a great owner. Now, I've been fortunate to be with some great organizations, with Philly and New England being two of them, but our owners are, they want to win. I think that's the secret, like for championship level teams across the board. They have to be passionate about winning. It's not about making money. They want to win. They're hands off. They let us do the work. Now, of course, there's budgets, there's things that you have to adhere to, and you have to explain to them why you're doing things you are. And sometimes they have good advice, that steer you one way or the other. But I think the number one quality that I would say for an owner is wanting to win. And we have a family group, obviously the Glazers, they all really want to win. And especially when you win one, now they've won two, but after you win it, they want to win again. They want to go to the country club and be the top dog. They want to do whatever it is. They want to win. So, and they will spare no expense. So that's what I have found. Now, believe it or not, some owners just don't want to win.
Erik, you want to jump in there?
The only thing I'd say is you talked about the importance of family and finding that balance. That's something that's been afforded to me. I've been through plenty personally from a family standpoint and had an owner that had my back. I've seen it with other people in our organization. I've seen coworkers lose their wives and how they've been handled in demanding roles, right? Where sports are everything, and that's always the most important thing. I've seen that over time happen time and time again. And then to what Julien said, when there's decisions to be made, having an owner that would disagree with me, but still let me do what I think we should do. Sometimes that's worked out well, sometimes it hasn't. But that space that exists as what you talk to between the working dynamic with John Cooper, a very similar thing. And if he's providing those behaviors to you, how can you not look at your directors and the people that you're supervising and try to kind of replicate those behaviors?
Your staff could only be as good as you let them be, as you allow them to be, right? You hopefully hired the right person, gave them a clear mandate, and after that, your job is to provide them support and resources. That relationship exists with our owners, right? They hopefully hired the right person, hopefully told us what the job was, what they were looking for, and then they provide us support and resources if you have a good one. And that's how it works out.
Yeah, my question is on the character development of the athletes. So you're giving kids $1 million contracts, right? And the stats show that most athletes end up bankrupt or losing all their money. So what are you guys doing to actually develop your talent and keep them making good decisions while they're in your organization?
Very good question. And we have a player engagement director, or he's vice president player engagement, Duke Preston, that is constantly bringing people in to talk to the players. And it's usually the young players. You want to hit them early on this. And we're seeing that in the last few years, or I should say maybe even 5-10 years, that really hasn't been the case. There's still some people that are, lose their money or make poor decisions, but it's not nearly as much as it used to be. Nowadays, in this day and age, I think maybe it's because of social media, maybe it's because of there's just more content out there that they're learning about, that the players aren't as flashy and as dumb with their financial decisions as they used to be. But we still want to make sure that they're making the right decisions, so we give them plenty of people to come in and give them advice and speak to them.
I would say we also bring in some people to talk to our young players. When we have development camps in the summer, we have different people from different walks of life come give them life lessons. But most of the stories you'll hear are players that lose all their money, I would say, when they're playing. But the biggest challenge for a retired athlete is when they retire. Like for a professional athlete, it's when they retire. That's when their life really changes. The divorce rate is sky high. It's incredible. So I think what we've found, I think all the major sports have found, is you have to invest in preparing your players for their post-playing career. And at least with regards to our sport, the Players Association and the Players Association's alumni group have done a really good job, I think, over the years of grabbing every retired player and staying on top of them, making sure they're okay, making sure they're getting advice. Oh, this is what you're thinking of doing? Okay, well, here's a resource. Here's a person who could help you to kind of mitigate the number of those very sad stories that we hear every now and then.
Yeah, we have the added layer, the added challenge with signing players from Latin America. Oftentimes you're making those commitments when they're turning 16 years old. Oftentimes for them to be in a position to get those signing bonuses at 16, they've been committed to an agent, or a trainer down there since they might have been 7 or 8 years old. They have a few grades of education, and that's it. And I think, we're far from perfect when it comes to this, but and once someone that doesn't come from a lot of money has a lot of money, whatever they tell you, whatever behaviors they've demonstrated prior, all bets can be off. I think our goal is just to try to provide as much education. The more in order your personal life is, the better you're going to be in your professional life, and that's something that at each step along the way we try to really lean into that and do it better. But it is a real challenge with the stresses and the pressures and the attention that comes with these jobs. And they're short-lived. No one thinks they're going to end. No one thinks they're going to be the one that doesn't make it. And that's a really difficult balance to walk.
So I'm feeling very shallow with this question, and I'm actually surprised that I'm the first one to ask it. And I'm going to say it for you off the record. There's absolutely nothing going to happen with this conversation. And I've been sitting here trying to figure out a way to ask the question that you might actually answer it. But big Rays fan, big Bucks and Lightning fan also, big advocate for you guys staying in St. Pete. As it is, we're warring between St. Pete and Tampa. And now as of yesterday, we're hearing that we're going to start warring with Orlando too. We're not worried about that? Oh, well, JP answered my question. Never mind, you're off the hook. So I guess the point of the question is I think regardless of where I think you should be is none of my business, right? But I think as a community, we want to make sure that the Rays stay here. And we certainly don't want them to go to Orlando. That's the big kick in the gut, right? And so what can we do really is where I was headed with this to make sure that the team knows that we feel you're important to our community.
Well, thank you for that. And I personally have, and this isn't to hide knowledge by any means, but my job is to keep this team as competitive as possible on the field, and every ounce of energy goes in that direction. I probably going back to 2008 when the designs for the stadium in downtown St. Pete were unveiled. Back then it was like every day kind of waiting to figure out where this is going to go. Over the many years since, there's times where it'll consume me a little bit. There's times where I got to just set it aside. I can tell you personally, I really like the team to stay in this area. I live in Tampa, so selfishly I wouldn't mind Tampa. That's a very selfish point of view. I think more than anything else, wanted to be here. My kids they were born here. This is home to us. I grew up in upstate New York, but this is home to us now. Staying here is pretty important to me. To the best of my knowledge, I think what's been put out there, at least publicly lately, about the progress in St. Pete and some of the optimism that's been expressed there, I think that is real. I do believe that we have an owner that does not want to move the team. That is something that I can say with some confidence. I don't think I'm violating anything that he shared with me in stating that. That is pretty consistent. It is for reasons that might date back to his childhood, something that is important to him, and something that he would like to figure out. And I hope that we do. And it seems like we're making some progress there. But me personally, I'm trying not to take our eyes too far away from making this team as special as it can, because that comes back to the support. This year's been a lot of fun. Our attendance is up. The energy in the park has been meaningfully higher than it's been perhaps since 2008, frankly. And that definitely helps. I think just there's a lot more of a positive vibe around this group, and there's nothing wrong with that. That can only help with a long-term solution, I think.
And I had Pat Williams on my show this morning, who's the lead for the Orlando bid, and I asked him about the public money, which is $1 billion. They have no commitment from the mayor or anyone who didn't even show up at the press conference. And they also have to get an owner who wants to put up $2 billion for an expansion team. They don't have an owner either. So that's about a $3.7 million hole they got to, or $1 billion hole they got to come up with.
Thanks,
it's not,
JP.
it's not happening. We love Pat, but it's not happening. I asked him if we could get some of that Orlando money over here, and he said, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. Our last question.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. First of all, I've sat in a lot of audiences under a lot of panels, and in my opinion, this is by far one of the best ones that I've sat up under. Second of all, I love sports, so that's one of the reasons that it's the best panel as well. But I would love to hear your definition of family dynamic versus team dynamic. I and my husband are both owners as well as CEO, CFO of our company. We definitely aspire to be as large as you all are. And just listening to the way that you speak on how you represent the organization, it seems as if you take some level of ownership to the company that you represent, but you also work under family dynamic. And so I had to shift my language from a family, because we are a family-owned business. We started our company out of the trunk of our car. Everybody was family that worked with the organization, to shifting it to a team dynamic. And so I'd love to hear that success challenge of working with a family and/or team versus family.
Great question.
We're earning our lunch with that one.
Yes.
I've never worked with family, so I don't know what the difference is, but I always am uncomfortable when business people are talking to their staff and they're referring to them as family. It rings hollow to me. I know they're well-intentioned and they probably mean it. And I think what they're trying to say is that we care about you, and that's okay. And we want to care about our people. They do so much for us. An organization is only as good as their people. Like, all that is true. Those cliches are true. That's why they're cliches. So I'm not sure I can answer your question. I just know, to me, there's a difference. Like, you never pick a favorite son. I have 2 sons. Like, I never pick a favorite. I have a favorite, like every family. But I won't make it public. But you have to choose between employees when it's time to get promotions or raises or how to allocate projects. And so you never fire a family member. You might stop spending time with them, but to me, they're completely different dynamics. And I'm really uncomfortable when people are comparing them.
You guys don't want to touch that. I understand. All right.
Great question.
Yes.
And great answer.
You stumped the panel. You think? Congratulations.
I am so glad Julien took that.